Thursday, May 14th. Read the article and answer the questions. Opinion: Democrats are borrowing socialist policies but not ideology. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is a rising political star. In June 2018, the 28-year-old easily defeated longtime New York Representative Joseph Crowley in the Democratic primary race. She is expected to defeat a Republican challenger in the general election this November. Nearly as impressive to her story is that she ran as a Democratic Socialist rather than as a traditional Democrat. After this primary, Democrat House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said that this win in one district is not to be viewed as something that stands for everything else. Her dismissiveness highlighted the tension between socialists and Democrats. Republicans, big believers in America's capitalist system, have traditionally said socialism is something to fear. Democrats, on the other hand, have tried to show themselves as different from socialists while sometimes adopting socialist causes. This dynamic has kept socialists at the margins of American politics, even as their policies have become mainstream. Ebbs and flows of socialism in U.S. The history of socialism in the United States is chaotic, its popularity shifting with the economic and political landscape. Socialists in the early 1800s wanted to end slavery and establish short-lived utopian communities. In the mid-1800s, German philosopher Karl Marx released his famous political pamphlet, The Communist Manifesto. He called for working people to overthrow the capitalist governments and social systems that he said used people for profit. Soon, the arrival of German immigrants to the U.S. brought Marxism and the founding of communist and socialist parties. In 1901, Eugene Debs co-founded the Socialist Party of America. It never had more than 100,000 members, but the Socialist Party was able to elect numerous candidates to local government positions countrywide. Debs received more than 900,000 votes when he ran for president in 1912 and 1920. Yet, despite these wins, socialists remained outside of power. In 1919 and 1920, labor groups began rising up. Anarchist groups, who were anti-government, carried out bombings in the U.S. Meanwhile, communists took power in Russia, toppling the former monarchy there. This led to the first Red Scare, red being the chosen color of socialist parties. Certain politicians began a campaign of propaganda and targeted raids against groups on the far left, including socialists. This soon ended, but it left a lasting image of socialism as an enemy of the state. Socialism was associated with Russian communism and characterized as a dangerous foreign force that stood against democracy. Democrats and Republicans both took up the anti-socialist cause. FDR steps in to counter Great Depression. In the 1930s, after the Great Depression led to poverty and economic decline, President Franklin D. Roosevelt passed New Deal legislation. It introduced the broad idea that the government has a responsibility to ensure the welfare of its people. This was certainly a shade redder than American policy in the past. In 1934, writer Harold Lasky noted that Roosevelt's policies were aimed at ensuring capitalism was the servant and not the master of the American people. Under Roosevelt, the modern balance between the mainstream parties and socialism was established. The Democrats would borrow from socialist policy proposals while disavowing the ideology to fight off attacks from Republicans. While he was slammed as a socialist by Republican politicians, Roosevelt defended himself by denying the connection rather than defending the merits of socialist ideas. Socialism truly became a toxic word in the mid-20th century. In 1947, Senator Joseph McCarthy began another Red Scare, accusing people of being socialist or communist. For the rest of the century, socialist was one of the dirtiest words in politics, helped along by figures like President Ronald Reagan. Some far-left ideas were revived in the 1960s and 70s, but they didn't much stick. Tensions between the Republican Party and socialists remained strong throughout the 20th century. However, the relationship was more complex between socialists and Democrats. Shades of red can be seen in Democratic policies like making college more affordable and increasing access to health care. Still, Democrats insist on saying they're a different party. President Lyndon B. Johnson dismissed accusations that he was promoting socialism. Still, his landmark Great Society legislative program and War on Poverty included civil rights legislation and Medicare. Reagan warned these would bring about socialism in the United States. In the 1990s, Bill and Hillary Clinton made efforts to pass healthcare legislation after Reagan, but were met with cries of socialism from the right. President Bill Clinton responded to this much as Roosevelt had, defending his programs while denying any association with socialist ideas. In 1998, he even equated socialism with tyranny during a speech. Obama-Clinton dismissed socialism. Under President Barack Obama, the right would label government policies such as the Affordable Care Act as socialist, which became a running joke to Democrats. Still, Obama encouraged those who accused him of being socialist to meet real socialists and defended his policies by citing his belief in capitalism. Even in 2015, Hillary Clinton was dismissive of socialism. During a debate, she said the U.S. is not Denmark, a country many Americans say has a democratic socialist system. In 2016, commentators frequently remarked that presidential candidate Bernie Sanders, a self-described democratic socialist, had pulled Clinton to the left during the campaign. Whether true or not, that sentiment captures the relationship between the Democrats and socialists for over a century. Socialists have long been kept from power while still offering ways forward. However, this dynamic can't hold for long. Income inequality continues to rise, the gig economy is creating harsh working conditions, and social justice issues are going unresolved. Clinton even suggested that by identifying as a capitalist, she risked distancing some potential Democratic voters. So, will this revived interest in socialism be sustained, and will Democrats make space for socialism? Republicans continue to decry socialism as a threat to society. Meanwhile, the Democrats have a chance to capitalize on the momentum of young, up-and-coming leaders such as Ocasio-Cortez and welcome socialists into the fold for the first time. Number 1. Which of these statements would be best to include in an objective summary of the article? A. Eugene Debs was one of the founders of the Socialist Party of America and later ran for president in 1912 and 1920. B. If anarchist groups had not carried out violent attacks to spread their anti-government message, socialism would have succeeded. C. Democratic socialists have been gaining popularity and having huge success in taking over the leadership of the Democratic Party. Socialism was associated with Russian communism and violence, leading Republicans and Democrats to take stand against it. Number 2. Which of the following details from the article is most important to the development of the central idea? A. She is expected to defeat her Republican challenger in the general election this November. B. Socialists in the early 1800s wanted to end slavery and establish short-lived utopian communities. Soon, the arrival of German immigrants to the U.S. brought Marxism and the founding of communist and socialist parties. D. Socialists have long been kept from power while still offering ways forward. Number 3. The author claims that Republicans have had a long-standing hostility toward the ideas of socialism. Which piece of evidence is not relevant to the claim? A. In June 2018, the 28-year-old easily defeated longtime New York Congressman Joseph Crowley in the Democratic primary race. She is expected to defeat a Republican challenger in the general election this November. B. Republicans, big believers in America's capitalist system, have traditionally said socialism is something to fear. Democrats, on the other hand, have tried to show themselves as different from socialists while sometimes adopting socialist causes. C. Tensions between the Republican Party and socialists remained strong throughout the 20th century. However, the relationship was more complex between socialists and Democrats. D. Reagan warned these would bring about socialism in the United States. In the 1990s, Bill and Hillary Clinton made efforts to pass healthcare legislation after Reagan, but were met with cries of socialism from the right. 4. One of the author's central claims is that Democrats sometimes adopt socialist ideas while rejecting socialism as an ideology. Evaluate whether reasoning is sound and if there is enough evidence to support this claim. A. There is ample evidence to support this claim. The author includes several examples of Democratic leaders who have gone through the cycle of supporting policies with socialist leanings, receiving accusations of socialism by Republicans, and then rejecting a connection to socialism. B. There is sufficient relevant evidence to support this claim. The author provides anecdotal evidence of several socialist policies that Democrats have secretly agreed with in private, but which they refuse to openly support for fear that Republicans would use it as a weapon against them in future elections. C. The author lists a lot of evidence, but it is not relevant to the claim. The author highlights different Democratic presidents that adopted policies that some feel was evidence of a socialist agenda, but in reality had nothing to do with socialism or socialist policy proposals. D. There is sufficient evidence for only part of the claim, but not enough of it. The author does provide documentary evidence in the final sentence section of the article, but it only highlights two traditional Democratic leaders without offering other examples of past Democratic leaders who adopted socialist ideas and policies.